right on time. I've got 7 o'clock on the nose here. Well, hello, everybody. Welcome. Thank you so much for spending your Wednesday evening with us on this beautiful Alberta evening. My name is Fran Kimmel, and I live in Lacombe, which is 20 minutes north of Red Deer. And if you haven't been to Lacombe, we're famous for our Lacombe pig, but we also are famous for many other things too, like our historic streets. It's a very pretty town, so come and visit us. I wanted to respectfully acknowledge that the land on which I live is Treaty 6 territory, the traditional home and meeting ground for many Indigenous peoples, including the Blackfoot, Dene, Cree, and Métis. And those of you from Calgary, including Robin, are joining us from the traditional territories of the Niitsitapi, Blackfoot Confederacy, the people of the Treaty 7 region in Southern Alberta, and Métis Nation of Alberta Region 3. So in terms of housekeeping tonight, we're going to have a lovely chat with Robin, and then we have all kinds of time for you to ask any and all of your burning questions to Robin. So she is willing to answer anything. I'm just putting words in your mouth here, Robin. So she'll answer
almost anything.
Almost anything. Well, most of it should be about writing, but almost anything.
I'm an open book. But be warned, my mom is on here somewhere, so.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay, good to know, Mom. Hi, Mom. So in terms of questions and answers, well, I think we'll save the questions till the end, but if you're thinking of things as we're going through and you want to throw anything into the chat, do. And we'll for sure deal with it before we say goodbye to each other tonight. But for now, it is my great pleasure to introduce the star of the night, and it's Robin van Eck, who grew up in British Columbia. Lucky for us, she moved to Alberta in the year 2000, and she has since become the executive director of the Alexandra Writers Center, where she plays a hugely important role in helping to build our writing community here in Alberta. Robin writes fiction, all kinds of fiction, literary, contemporary, horror, weird, offbeat. She also writes creative nonfiction. And she always writes about issues that are important to her, that she's passionate about, including mental illness, homelessness, death and dying, and family dynamics. Her work has appeared in many, many online and print publications, both in Canada and internationally. And her first novel, Rough, was released last fall with Stonehouse Publishing. Stonehouse Publishing is a relatively new publisher here in Alberta. They're a lovely publisher. So congrats on that, Robin. Welcome to you. How are you?
I'm wonderful. And thanks to Fran for doing this.
I'm so happy to be here. So happy. So Robin, it's been, your book was published in November. Was it November last year?
Yeah, November 1st.
What was it like to hold your very first book in your hands?
Quite surreal, actually. And you know, and that feeling hasn't even gone away. Every time I order a new box of books from the publisher, whenever they arrive, it's just kind of this overwhelming feeling every time I open the box and see these books sitting there. It's like, oh my God, these are my books. And it's such a pretty cover, and you know.
It is such a pretty cover. I have it right here in case any of you haven't actually bought the paperback version of it. It's pretty. Did you have anything to do with the design?
Not at all. But what was fascinating was that the color combination are some of my favorite colors. So when I saw it, I was just like, oh, wow. So it worked out like they were reading my mind or something.
It's really beautiful. Lots of authors go through post-publishing blues. So they've worked so hard for so long, months and months, often years on their novel, and it's been all their own, and it's been their baby, and they hold it close to their hearts, and then it goes into book stores, and all of a sudden it doesn't belong to them anymore. It belongs to the world. Did you go through anything like that, Robin? Any sort of, oh, now what?
Oh, 100%. So much is out of our control. after the book is out there. And I think there was actually this fear right afterward, like, oh my God, people are actually going to read this now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, I know that's why I wrote it, but at the same time, like, I don't think that really hits you until it's actually out there. And what's so lovely though is, seeing, friends send me pictures of, look, I saw your book on the shelf in chapters, and I haven't been into a chapters probably since 2019. So, I haven't been able to go and see these for myself, but apparently they're out there. So
they're out there. It's selling, and the reviews have been so good. The reviews have been really strong everywhere. So congrats, because that's a scary thing too, is waiting for reviews.
I'm still waiting for that negative one.
Maybe you'll never get one.
Maybe that's what my publisher said too, but
yeah. Well, it's such a good book. We've called this conversation tonight Head for Higher Ground, which is a really appropriate title because your book, Rough, takes place during 6 days during the historic flood in Calgary, which was in 2013. I cannot believe it has been 8 years since the flood that's turned our lives upside down. Back when we were so innocent and we thought this is the worst thing that could happen. and 8 years ago. So I'm curious, Robin, do you have any specific memories of the flood itself, or what were you doing during the time of the flood?
The biggest thing I remember is, well, the first thing that I think really impacted even like the writing community, I think, at least for us anyway, was Lori Hannell, who actually I saw is here, was our writer in residence that year. And we had to cancel her last event because everything got shut down in Inglewood, and like nobody knew what was going on because the waters were coming, and the building was shut down. And so we cut. I mean, everything else went perfectly for that event, but we ended up having to cut her last event, and that's something that always stands out to me.
Yeah.
Otherwise, actually, I remember seeing the water getting higher and the pictures of downtown and just being like, whoa. I live in the southeast of Calgary, right by Fish Creek Park. And, you don't really think that like, oh, it could actually impact that area as well. But we walk in the park all the time, and we happened to go down there and go, oh, let's go see what happened. And I was just astounded, at all the green areas that we usually loved and walked were just flooded, just covered in water. It didn't actually impact any of the houses or anything in our community, but they did shut down our power. So we did end up having to go elsewhere. So that was weird, but at the same time, I mean, that was the worst thing that happened. We went and stayed with some family for a couple of days, and, came back one day to empty out our freezer before we lost everything, but for us, that was about the worst of it. And it was a couple of days, and that was it. And it receded so fast.
Yes, it came and went so fast. I have a memory. I was driving into Calgary actually just the day before the river actually flooded the whole of downtown, and I was going for my daughter's shower, and so I didn't know how bad things were until I got on the number 2 highway, and I was driving in, and the sky was so black. It was like all the color had bleached out of the world, and it was just the rain was coming down in buckets, and army truck after army truck after army truck passed me, and I was white knuckling it and thinking, this is the apocalypse, like this is the end of the world as we know it. So I did get to Calgary just fine, and the shower did go on, but only the people in the north could go to the shower because everybody on the south side of the city, of course, couldn't get across the city. So yeah, it was crazy. I'd love to talk about the river more. So And I think that's a really good place for us to start with you. The river is a very powerful narrator in your book, Rough. And so I think it would be fun if you read us a little passage from the river's perspective. Are you happy to do that?
Well, of course, I'm happy to do anything you ask of me, Fran.
Okay.
Well, actually, I know usually when I read, like I'll read something from the right from the beginning, but I think I'm actually going to skip to, where is it? It's actually just the beginning of day 3 and the river. So the river at this point, like, I mean, we kind of started everything around, you know, June 19th, right? Day 3, I mean, the river had not completely come over the riverbanks yet. So, and here in the book, like the river is kind of, it's watching everything that's going on around it. So, I really love this particular scene, so I'm gonna read this one.
Okay.
No loitering. The sign presses into the wall, white and accusatory. It's meant for them and school-aged kids. Leave your backpacks at the door. What they really mean, don't hang out in front of the store. You'll offend the paying customers. Read between the lines. A man in a black coat leans over his shopping cart. White hair runs wild, hangs past his shoulders. A couple of teenagers exit the coffee shop. You smell that? The teenagers laugh, holding their noses for effect. You piss yourself? Not recently, the man mutters back and continues to dig through his stash while the teenagers skip past, forgetting him the instant they're out of sight. The man calculates his collection, his treasures. To most, it's useless garbage. Buggered wheels, skipping and resisting over cracks in the pavement. A metal prong protrudes from the side of the cart. The delicate veer in wide circles around him, plucking at their phones, oblivious, anxious. None of them wonder about the person who sits in the shadows all day long, desperately longing for a little kindness, a second to be noticed. Why do they have to be like that? The parking lot is packed tight with people with no place to go. They race by, cupping gold-plated lattes and shitty coffee, Filipino nannies with screeching toddlers in tow, out for a stroll in the blazing sunshine, but not before grabbing a venti caramel macchiato and carrying on in a caffeine haze. The old man checks his pocket, finds nothing but a bottle cap and 2 useless pennies. He pushes his cart down the sidewalk, dragging his shadow behind him. The sky opens, driving darts into the surface of the river, shards of glass striking and cutting, reaching underneath to the agitated slurry below. Thunder, lightning splashes the faces of those along the banks, umbrellas, raincoats, ponchos, admiring the ferocity of the waves, muttering to one another. They lean over balconies in awe of the sheer force, magical, godlike. No sign of stopping, and then suddenly it ceases, dries up. Puddles, the only proof of existence, gather in pockets along the twisted pathways through the park, reflecting the clouds above. And the people, they twist back inside to the comfort of their iPhones and Netflix. For the rest, when the rain comes, they scatter, find cover, and only when it ends do they pick their way back. Feet shuffle and scrape along the wet pavement. Grass sparkles in the re-emerging sunlight. Water drips down the sides of buildings, off awnings, and they emerge from the trees into the wide open, skin exposed, embracing the sun, the heat, huddled on wooden benches, tainting the air, soggy and unkempt. A man urinates in the bushes. I'll stop there.
That gives me shivers. It gives me shivers. The river is so interesting. It rages and roars, and it has knuckles and teeth and aching bones and feelings and motivations. And what's the term for it? Is it personification when you give human qualities to something that's not human, right? Yes. I'm so interested in what made you decide to give the river a voice?
A lot of drafts and realizing some things weren't working. Initially, those sections were actually from, for those of you who have read the book, those sections were originally from Jagger's point of view.
Oh.
And I don't know, it just, it lost something, I think, and it lost a little bit of the mystery of it by doing that. So I was playing around with it, and I really wanted to incorporate a little bit more of Shermeto's friend Harlow. And and because Harlow had such a connection to the river, it felt like, either whether people felt that it was the river's perspective or maybe it was Harlow watching, like either way. So that's kind of when I did the rewrite, that's kind of where I went with it. And, and also it was a little bit of, I'd already done that, but then there was a little bit of push from my publisher saying that something wasn't quite connecting properly. And that's when I was like, no, I'm going to do this, because it had been in the back of my mind anyway.
So the river came into being with the small little river chapters after it had gone to the publisher, and that's something you worked out in the process of editing with the publisher?
Yes and no. So it was the river when it went to the publisher, but it wasn't as strong as it was until after it went to the publisher. And we said, no, something else has to connect a little bit. So
I just think it adds such depth to the novel, having the river and the river's perspective, and that sort of overarching perspective, looking down, watching. And just having been in Calgary during the flood, like it really felt like the heavens and the rain and the water had a life of its own. So I think you capture that so well in the way you do it, and it elevates the book. So well done, well done. Homelessness plays a thread. It has a thread running through the entire novel. It's the setting, it's the backdrop, it's where all the action takes place, mostly in downtown Calgary. How did you give us such an intimate view of homelessness, Robin? Research specifically on homelessness?
I did a lot of research on homelessness. If anyone's ever looking to do research on anything, YouTube videos are amazing. YouTube, I mean, I spent days pouring through videos of homeless people and bawling my eyes out, like watching some of these, listening to some of these stories. And then afterwards I thought, no, I actually have to go talk to some people as well. So I did. I went downtown, and I would take lunch with me, and I would find someone that I thought might talk to me. Not everybody was willing to talk. Everyone was willing to take the food, but not everyone was willing to talk. And that's fine, but there were a lot who were. So, and it was great.
That is so interesting that you took your research to that level. Is that the first time that you have, when you've been researching a writing project, that you've actually, tried to interview the people that you're going to be writing about?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, and I felt like I had to, because, it's just one of those things, like, you don't want to get it wrong. Right. And you don't want to offend anyone. And, we worry about that as writers all the time, like, are we going to put something out there that is so offensive that, or people are going to take it the wrong way, when, that was never our intention. And, we're just trying to tell a good story, or, and I really didn't want it to become this didactic kind of, in your face, this is the issue, everybody better pay attention kind of thing. I just wanted it to be a part of the story, and it's just who the character was and the situation that they were in. So trying to think as humanly as possible as well, like, and avoid all the stereotypes. And
well, you gave us such an intimate look, and everybody seemed like incredible individuals in their own right. And you have such a rich cast of supporting characters, Jagger and Scissor and Harlow and all the a lot of the people who have been homeless. I'm wondering if any of the stories that the actual people you interviewed or you met with provided lunch to, if any of their stories or anecdotes or experiences actually worked their way into the novel.
You know, I tried to avoid that as much as possible. I really went trying to understand who they were more than what their stories were. I will say one of the characters, though, later in the book when he encounters Gray Howard, he was one of my favorite characters to write just because he was so weird, right? And I had a little bit of fun with him, but he was very loosely based on someone that I saw in one of the videos that I watched, actually, who is just this really, really intriguing character. There's a series of videos that I believe the Calgary Police Service did about homeless people downtown. And I can't remember exactly what it's called, but it was absolutely brilliant. And it just followed like a few of the homeless in downtown Calgary. And just one of these guys was just so intriguing that I had to kind of put someone like that in there. So, yeah.
Well done, well done. You know, we hear about homelessness a lot, and we hear about ending homelessness and eradicating homelessness. And, you know, we can read articles about that. We hear about that in the news. But one of your main characters, Shermeto, he is homeless by choice. So he has a place to go. His daughter is wanting desperately to get him out of downtown Calgary during the flood and get him to her house. He has a place to go and he chooses to live on the streets. Do you, from your experience and your research, do you think that's common? That it's a choice for people?
Common? No, definitely not common. Most of the people I talk to, like, it's very much circumstances have put them there. You know, it's addiction, it's mental health. And, you know, sometimes it is, they just lost their job and lost their home and, you know, and it's just, you know, circumstances. But, no, it is pretty rare for someone to choose to just kind of give up and leave their life behind and go and live that way. But, and I never found anyone downtown who was down there because they wanted to be. So, like, I'll clarify that. And it's interesting you asked that question, because when I started this book, one of the first questions I asked myself is, why would someone choose to be homeless? You know, and you know, some people are already aware of this, but it is loosely based on some experiences I've had with my own father, and you know, and trying to, and there were just those points where, you know, like my dad was never homeless, but he was always very, very close. You know, he was always teetering on that edge. And I think there's a lot of times where we have to ask the question, like, you know, when do we as family members give up on our other family person because they, you know, there's just nothing we can do for them, you know, or, you know, at the same point, you know, they give up so much that they just say, I don't care, I'm going to go live on the street, right? So those were, you know, similar situations that I was in as well. So I did bring a lot of that into the story, and trying to answer questions for myself. I think it was. Yeah.
Has it been helpful to you, the cathartic, the writing of the book itself, in terms of just understanding that better?
I think so. I think I'm a lot more patient. Yeah, I think I'm a lot more patient But, you know, and overall in the writing of the book, I think I understand the whole community a lot better than I did before.
Do you have any advice for the rest of us? So I live in Lacombe, and we're a small population of 12,000 people. So we don't have a homeless population here in my town, but I certainly go to Calgary and Edmonton often enough. And I'm never sure what to do. So do you have any advice for us when we're interacting with the homeless as to, do you strike up a conversation? Do you walk by? Do you is there anything specific that you have learned, I guess, in sort of studying this so closely?
That one of the things that the homeless people really want is just to be noticed and, you know, and recognized as human beings. So, you know, you don't have to give them money, you don't have to give them food, but, you know, don't turn away from them, don't hide your face, and, you know, and try to make eye contact and smile, you know, and just like you would treat anybody else you were passing on the street that happened to make eye contact with you. I think that, you know, that's a starting point. But you know, and if you want to do more, you know, give to a local, you know, food bank, or not, you know, food bank, but drop-in center or the mustard seed or any of those kind of organizations that are you know, working really hard to help them. And incidentally, I was just watching on the news to this evening, because we are heading into a massive heat wave here in Calgary. You know, places like the mustard seed and that are in desperate need of bottled water and things like that to keep people hydrated. So, you know, It's interesting because you think about, you know, we worry about them in the cold, but we never think about them in the heat as well, right?
Right. Well, we don't have that much of it. Like it's
we don't. Rare. This is going to be very unusual for us to be this hot.
Yeah. Well, that's a good reminder to us, Robin. Thank you. Thanks. The year of the pandemic has been so hard. It has been so hard, and we've all been experiencing such loss and such grief. And even if we haven't, you know, physically felt the grief, I think we've all been grappling with the loss of what was, which is exactly what your characters are struggling with in this book, is the loss of what was. Your two main characters, Shermeto and Kendra. The book is a mystery. Homeless people are being disappeared. They're dying. And so there's the mystery trying to figure that out. But the book is also this very poignant family drama about the raw and conflicted relationship between a father and his daughter. So I think it would be lovely, Robin. I would love to hear you read a little bit more from either the daughter's perspective, Kendra's perspective, or Shermeto's perspective. Are you willing to do that for us and maybe set it up for us a bit? Again, you keep saying that you will do whatever I tell you to, so please read.
Well, you know what? You actually made me. You know, I had this. Now I'm questioning, because I had a plan.
Oh, go with your plan.
I had a plan, but no, I will go with my plan, because it's too hard for me to make different decisions off the cuff.
Go with your plan.
So, and actually, in anything I've done, any interviews or anything, I realize I have never really read anything from Kendra's perspective. So I'm actually just going to read the first scene, the first time that we meet her in the book. So there's no setup required. All right. Okay. Kendra kneels in the middle of the aisle, the ground under her damp, the cold seeping through her pants. The procession has barely begun. First, the bridesmaids in their lavender gowns, spaghetti straps hugging their shoulders, the hair piled high in ringlets and innumerable bobby pins. The chairs on either side of the aisle are sinking into the wet grass, and the guests look uncomfortable, sweating in their suits and blazers, dresses and shawls. Kendra usually loves outdoor weddings for the quality of light, but not for the unpredictable weather. It's been an unusually soggy summer, the past week the worst, and yet no last-minute changes were made, at least not ones Kendra was made aware of. Every bride she knows would be frantic, planning for the worst. Not this one. Sheila was her name, and she'd been a problem right from the beginning. Kendra remembers the terse emails, the demands, when she met with the couple to discuss specific poses, duration, shots, angles, guests. Sheila sat there with her arms folded across her chest, unwilling to give a little when Kendra suggested an alternate location for light and scenery, chance of rain. The husband-to-be, Brian, tried to reason with her that Kendra was making a good point. It was important to have a backup plan. It's my wedding and it will be how I want it to be, Sheila had said. And then Kendra had been 10 minutes late because no one told her of the change of venue, and there was no time for the mother and bride shots in the bedroom. Sheila stood in the doorway, anger webbing out from under her tiara. She muttered something to her mother and then slammed the door. Kendra managed to get a couple of shots, but the light coming in the window was harsh, a slap upside the bride's cheek, and the mother was squinting. Not much Kendra was going to be able to do to fix that. The bride begins her procession, a wide smile stretched across her face, the light catching her princess crown. Kendra hasn't seen a dress quite this extravagant in a long time. The sequined bodice catches the sun and shoots it in varying directions. The skirt rustles at her ankles. At least there is no train to get tangled in. She knows the glare is going to be hard to overcome, likely slicing across the lens. If she's lucky, a few light bubbles will emerge and will lend to a more enchanting effect, but she's not hopeful. Kendra gets a few more shots of the bride and groom under the lattice arch, then slides into the background, taking some candid shots of the guests, the scenery, and then pauses to watch the vows, the happiness that fills this space. Aren't you supposed to be in there? Kendra glances to her right at the woman who has come up beside her. She's never seen this one before. You're paid to be here, the woman continues. Who are you? Kendra asks. Bride's sister, and she told me to keep an eye on you. I'm sure she did, Kendra mumbles, loud enough to be heard, but low enough to be garbled. Then louder. Thanks for your interest, but I've been doing this long enough. Kendra raises her camera and catches the first kiss as a married couple and a few more shots as they make their way to a table off to the side for the signing of the documents. Get in there, the woman prods, pushing on Kendra's arm. Don't touch me, Kendra says, making her way up the aisle. Well, who the hell does this woman think she is? The woman hangs back, the same know-it-all smirk plastered across her face as her sister earlier this morning. Obviously, the smug arrogance runs in the family. Kendra gets off a few more shots of the happy couple, signing their lives away for richer or poorer until death. I'll leave it there.
Mm-hmm. Great scene, great intro to her as well. I just wanted to wring that bride's neck. We've all, I think we've all, anybody who's been in the service industry, anybody who's dealt with, disgruntled clients, just, yeah, we can all, that's a very relatable scene. I became so fond of Kendra. I was rooting for her all the way. And she had to deal with such a lot of trauma at a young age. Her brother, her sister, her mother, her father, all of her family leaving her in one way or another. So we can't give away all the ways that they left her, but just a tremendous amount of trauma for her. So I'm curious if you believe that people can be whole again if they've experienced such trauma early in their life.
Wow, that's a really deep question. Me personally, I think anyone can claw their way back. Like if you're willing if you're willing to do it, if you're willing to put in the work that is required to heal, I think anyone can be maybe not completely whole. There's always going to be something missing, but I think we can definitely be better versions of ourselves.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Kendra goes through quite a transformation, I think, over the course of this book. I'm wondering if a bit younger Kendra would have, you read the first scene of her walking away from being so angry with this bride to be and saying, okay, I've had enough. I've had enough with that. I wonder if she would have done the same thing a couple of years before, or is this just kind of a time for her when it all comes to a head?
I think I think everything's coming to a head, like everything that she's dealt with before. And, she's dealing with a very real divorce right at that point as well. And, and I think just the wedding itself has kind of pushed her over the edge, and she's not, when weddings are supposed to be happy times, but, her world is falling apart. So, just in relationship aspects. So yeah, I think that's more what would have caused it than anything else.
When you think of Kendra after the book, how do you imagine she's doing now? If she's a real person, how is she doing?
I think she's okay. I think I have to think she's okay, but without giving anything away, I think she's finally gotten, a family that she's wanted,
Yeah, for sure. And seemingly dealt with a lot of the things that have been plaguing her since she was a young girl in very dramatic ways throughout the book. Just for those, if there's anybody here who hasn't read the book, Kendra's father, Shermeto, ends up in the hospital. And so she connects with him. He's been homeless for a while. And so she keeps losing touch with him. So their lives collide, and they're colliding right at the time of the flood, which is a high danger time, particularly for homeless people, because they have no way to escape. So that's what brings their lives together in this book in a very, very dramatic way. I think we need to talk about her dad, Kendra's dad, Shermeto. He can be a hard man to love. He's a hard man to love. I was absolutely rooting for him too, but I was just so upset because he was resisting where I felt he needed to go and where maybe you felt he needed to go. The entire time throughout the book, he's resisting that. I'm just curious, how challenging was it for you to write this man?
Okay, so this character actually appeared in a novel that I was working on way years prior, and he was a secondary character. He wasn't homeless, but he was really kind of a gross, obnoxious man. But he was a secondary character, and he started to take over that story. And so I had to, kind of fight back against that, saying, no, like, this isn't your story. And it actually made me stall out on that particular manuscript because I just didn't know what to do with it anymore. And when I finally found the idea for this book, right away I knew who that character was going to be. Like, I knew this is the story that he's been wanting to write or wanting to tell. And there were definitely challenging parts, especially because my very first draft, I wrote it all in first person. And I was so frustrated with him. I couldn't be in his head anymore. And I finally was like, no, I have to pull back a bit. And yeah, he was very infuriating. So then I changed the whole manuscript to third person just to kind of create an illusion of distance between me and him. And it really helped.
Helped.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you were you fond of him? Did you love him? Did you care about him a lot? Or were you fighting with him most of the time as you were writing him out on the page?
I cared about him. But I was so frustrated that he kept not wanting to do what I wanted him to do.
Yeah.
You know? Of course, it would have been a really short book if he'd just done everything that I wanted him to do. You know, so.
But that's interesting, Robin, because from a reader's perspective, we're frustrated too. Like it's a similar kind of experience, and which is a very human experience. We all get frustrated when we can see a path for people that we think makes sense and would make their lives, would make them suffer less. And we want them to take that path. And of course they don't, and they have to take their own path. It's a frustrating experience for those watching or looking in. So
well, I think, and even like new writers, if they ever, you know, if it, you know, when we're talking about conflict in books and increasing tension, I mean, they tell us to, you know, throw all of the bad stuff you possibly can at your character before you give them any relief whatsoever. So you know, yeah. Sometimes writing, I thought I went a little overboard, but I don't think I did anything that he couldn't handle. So
right,
you can look at it that way, right?
For sure. And so much of it, like just the smaller things had so much meaning, like, are his socks dry? Oh my gosh, Kendra has given him a new pair of boots. Now he has to struggle with feet in a new pair of boots, which you'd think would be a nice thing, a good thing, but it's a struggle. So
everybody knows how terrible it is to break a new pair of shoes, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Boots. Yeah,
exactly. So all those things, I think, when it add up to make it really work. So well done on that for sure. I love the ending of the book. I just love the ending, and of course I can't give it away. We can't give it away because if you haven't read it, you need to read it so that you can experience it for yourself. But did you have that ending in mind right at the beginning? Did you know how it was going to end, or did you discover that through the writing?
Once I really figured out the river scenes, I knew how well, if you're meaning the end, I knew how it was going to end, you know, with the river sections. In terms of Shermeto's story and Kendra's, yeah, I knew what was going to happen at the end. I didn't know how it was going to happen. And I think, you know, if you read it, like it's kind of inevitable, like, right? What happens, but yeah, I knew, like, it seemed like there was really no other way to end the story.
Mm-hmm.
So
well, I really like the ending. So curious, do you have a favorite scene in the book? One that's your very favorite? Was that one of the ones that you read, the river scene? Was that one of your favorites in the book?
No, I think one of my favorite scenes is when Shermeto encounters Gray Howard and his gang of other people around him. Just because they're just so weird. You know? I think that was one of my favorite scenes to write. And actually initially, like, I mean, in the book, it takes place in a park. In the very first draft, it took very similar scene, but it took place in the sewer. I had made them go underground. And then I realized how logistically wrong that was during a flood. Right? But that was a fun scene to write, and I definitely, you know, had to keep it in some way when I realized I couldn't have them go underground because it didn't make any sense. And you know, and I just love Gray Howard because he says he's, you know, searching for the key to the city, and you know, the master key to the city. And And although I never mentioned Mayor Nenshi by name, I mean, everybody knows who the mayor was at the time. So, you know, even those like knowing that kind of stuff, in my head made it funnier. So
Yeah, no, that was a really good scene. And I could see him coming back, but like he might be one of those characters that's hard to let go of, and he ends up in another story somewhere down the road for you.
who knows?
Because we didn't get much of him.
No.
We didn't get much. So your readers are going to want more. Did you have a scene that was just agonizingly hard to write? Was there any scenes that you struggled with more than others?
The second river scene actually was really difficult to write, but
I think I've mentioned this to you before, but the river reminds me of in the book, The Book Thief, and Death as the narrator. The river had a similar kind of feel to me, to that narrator in that book. So they were some of my favorite pages, actually, was the river. So I'm curious, Robin, what is it that you find the most interesting about writing? Can you describe what that is for you? What's the most interesting aspect of it for you?
I think for me, I think it's discovery. It's just the discovery of different characters and different people in different situations, and just being able to kind of unpack all of that, you know. And then it's kind of like amazing when I consider this, like, wow, these are my words that are doing this, but yet like these are characters on a page that are just, you know, starting to come alive. You know, I mean, one of my favorite parts of writing is character development, and just getting to know who these characters are. And, you know, and I often have no idea where the story's going, but I do know who these characters are. And I do spend a lot of time trying to, you know, really kind of figure out, like, did they really do this? Or, you know, and, you know, does this make sense? And, you know, so, yeah.
So you're very much a character driven kind of writer versus plotting kind of writer. And the plot sort of comes out of, okay, what would the character do next? What would the character do next?
Yeah.
That makes sense. I'm wondering if that sense of discovery that you just said, that is the most interesting part of writing. I'm wondering if that changes for you at all, depending on what genre you're writing. So I know you've written horror and you've written, you know, offbeat kinds of stuff. And I haven't read any of your horror. I haven't read any of that you've written, but is it a similar sense of discovery for you?
Absolutely.
Is it?
Yeah, because I mean, it doesn't really matter what genre you're writing. At least, you know, for me, it's, you know, you're exploring different things. And with horror, it's fun because you're exploring fear in, you know, in different ways, right? And you're, you know, and there's, you know, everybody's afraid of something. So, you know, and trying to elevate that to, you know, I'm not interested in writing, you know, like gory horror or anything like that, but, you know, very, you know, creepy stuff, and Shane can relate to that, and it's watching. You know, but like just like that creepy and unsettling type of horror that you kind of go, oh, like what just happened? And I honestly have not written a lot of horror. I had one short story that was published by Lamplight magazine a few years ago, which is apparently a really hard magazine to get published in. So when they accepted, I was like, whoa, like super excited, and they paid. So, you know, when people pay, that's great. And it was just, and, you know, and that story was just about a woman who was getting ready to die, you know, and but she goes a little crazy too. So you know, but it was definitely like it was a fun and interesting story to write. And you know, and it was definitely a little unsettling.
Yeah. Did you keep yourself up at night when you write scary stuff? I haven't written much scary stuff, but I've been too scared to go to sleep with some of this stuff. And then I'm thinking, that's ridiculous. You're making this up. Like, it's not even real. You're just making it up.
But it's in your head. It's in your head a lot, right? So
Your,
I can definitely make sense that it would keep you up. Horror doesn't really keep me up. I actually, just a few weeks ago, my daughter made me watch every single one of the Saw movies in a weekend. We watched 7 movies in like 2 days, and you would think you would be fried, or you would be dreaming about saw traps and all the horrible things that they can do to you. But no, I slept like a baby. So I don't know. I guess it's okay.
yeah. Good work. I'm wondering if you have any part of writing that you really dislike.
Editing.
Research or what did you just say? Sorry.
Editing.
Editing.
Yeah. Yes, I loathe the editing process. I wish that when we wrote a draft of a manuscript, it just came out brilliantly the first time, and we didn't have to do anything more. Because I think the first draft is so much fun, and you just, you know, and I mean, I know it's messy and that's why you have to edit, but it's so much fun writing a first draft. And
that's so interesting, Robin, because I feel exactly opposite. I find the first draft is agonizing. It's just hard. And I love rewriting. That's my favorite part. Isn't that funny? And I think there's a lot of writers in here tonight. We could probably do a poll and we're all over the map on this. So, yeah.
Yeah, probably. And of course the readers out there, like they have no idea what goes on back here and how much we agonize over every single word. And is this scene going to be funny? Is this scene going to make them cry? Is, you know, like, oh my God, the things we agonize over.
And there's so many steps involved in creating a little scene, like on so many different levels. So in order to make it work. I'm really interested in your role as the executive director for the Alexander Writers Center. If you see all kinds of emerging writers, you meet all kinds of writers, have you noticed writers' struggles changing, or their challenges being different in this past year because of the pandemic? Or are writers still carrying the same worries that we always carry? Or has there been anything, have you noticed anything?
I think the biggest thing I've seen, at least for local writers, I asked this question on Twitter, like near the beginning or about midway through the pandemic. But locally, I think we're very unfocused. You know, it's really hard. And I know for me personally, it has been so hard to focus on writing the past year because there's so much else going on. And, you know, and you would think that isolation is the thing that we long for the most as writers, you know, but it's not true. Like, we do need the support of other people. So I think that's been having a really big impact on people. Although, you know, people are still taking classes, so, which is fantastic, you know, so they're still staying engaged. But there was definitely, at the beginning of the pandemic, there was definitely a drop off as people were like scrambling, trying to figure out what the heck was happening in the world, in our lives. And but I think once we kind of got used to it, people started to pull their way back. And I know I've started to pull my way back. So, you know, and I more so now, but I think that's because there's a light at the end of the tunnel now. Right. So But on Twitter, when I had asked, like, I had asked, like, how many people, I asked if people were actually writing or if they were just thinking about writing. Because for me, I was thinking about writing a lot, but I was not actually sitting down to do the work. And I got a lot of response from that tweet. And I think a lot of people are even offended that I asked the question, because there's people out there who are just like writing like crazy, So, I mean, again, everybody's different and everyone deals with these challenges differently. So
for me, one of the things that happened, and I just got rectified fairly recently, actually, was I had a lot of trouble reading. So I subscribed to the New York Times and the Atlantic and all kinds of things. There was Trump and everything going on at the same time. So I was quite a news-based junkie, but I was having a heck of a time reading fiction. And so that has come back, and it's just such a joy and such a gift to be able to read books and fully immerse myself in them again, because that was something that the pandemic took away from me for a while. Do you have any advice, Robin, for new writers, emerging writers, old writers?
No, I think don't be in a hurry. Like I think that's what I see the most, like with the years that I've been with the Writing Center, is that a lot of people are really in a hurry to write a book. And writing a book takes a really long time. And, unless, I mean, I don't know. I mean, some people can write novels very quickly, and have them really, really solid. But I think the majority of people, just take your time and get the words right, get the story right,
Yeah. Good advice. Good advice for all of us, I think. So, and actually it's a good life advice too. Don't be in such a hurry with everything. Yeah. It's just
and the pandemic has kind of taught us that too. Like we have to slow down.
We do.
And just
take
care of one another, whatever they're trying to tell us to do.
For sure. And sort of taking joy in the little moments. So taking joy in a good sentence. I got a really great sentence today, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Well, before we end here, I thought it would be fun to do a really quick round with you of either or. So I didn't run this by you ahead of time, but are you game? Really quick one with me?
Sure.
It's easy. So super easy. So, okay. First questions are about writing.
Okay.
Pen or keyboard?
Pen.
Silence or soundtrack?
Silence.
Coffee shop or home?
Home.
Morning or evening?
Morning.
Pantser or outliner?
Answer.
We can explain that if anybody wants that explained in a minute. Okay, how about reading? This is about your reading. Ebooks or paperbacks?
Paperback.
Horror or mystery?
Horror.
Dark or light?
Dark.
Tied up or ambiguous endings?
Oh, talking about reading. Oh, I like ambiguous endings. I like writing ambiguous endings as well, but I think I like reading ambiguous endings.
Short stories or novels?
Is there a both option?
There has to be a both, right?
I love the short story form. So yeah.
Okay, there is a both for me too. Okay, last round. This is just about life. Tent or trailer?
Tent.
Lake or river?
Lake.
Mountains or prairies?
Mountains.
Beer or wine?
Wine.
Poetry or song?
Song.
Rock concert or folk festival?
Oh, folk festival.
Theater or film?
Theater.
You're such a good sport. Thank you. Thank you. I always feel like you learn so much about people with those quick little responses. And you and I are very similar, actually. You're very, I would have thought you were different on that. I would have thought you would have written to music going on, not with silence. I don't know why I thought that. And I also thought, Robin, you would go to a rock concert before a folk festival. I don't know why I thought that either.
Because it depends on who the rock concert is, but I love folk. So I grew up with it thanks to my dad too. So
there you go. Well, I'm looking, we have no questions on the chat.
People have been really quiet in the chat. We must have been mesmerizing.
People have been so quiet. But now what we can do is we can just open it up. And if anybody has questions for Robin, you can just unmute yourself and start talking. And if anybody's too shy or uncomfortable with that, you can throw a question into the chat and I'll ask the question on your behalf. So, quiet.
See, I have wine.
I should have had wine too. I just have water, boring old water.
I've been hiding it over here.
Oh, please. Okay, Linda.
I'll ask a question. How did you find your publisher?
Oh, a lot of trial and error. It was a lot of Stonehouse was the 8th or 9th publisher that I submitted to. And everyone else, even though like it got really close with some of the others, most of them it was reject after reject after reject. And yeah, and there was another publisher that was close, but in the end turned it down. And when I finally accepted the offer with Stonehouse, there was another one that was interested, but they ran out of time. I said, too bad. Yeah, so I mean, it can take a long process. It can take a long time to find a publisher. What was your experience like, Fran, with finding publishers?
Well, my first book was with New West Press, which is a small press out of Edmonton, and that was quite fast, actually. I think that might have been my second. I think I sent it to one other before that, and they rejected it. So I rewrote the whole book and sent it to New West, and then they took it. My second book.
You rewrote the whole book off of like one rejection?
I hate rejections. Personally, and it's the dumbest field to be in the world, because a writer's life, it's all rejection. Like every step of the way after you publish, it's a lot of rejection. You know, every time you get a bad review, it's in a sense a bit of a rejection. So you can't take it personally. But my second book, I actually had an agent by then, so she was the one who shipped it around, and she didn't send me rejection by rejection. So they're very kind to you. They sort of group them, they lump them into, they might take out some words, but it was rejected by the big houses. And there's only a few big houses now, like the Macmillan and whatever they are, but Simon and Schuster. So, and then it got picked up by a publisher out of Toronto.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but it's a long process. You have to have thick skin, and you have to have friends that you can cry to and say, oh, and they get it, because it's just a matter. I think the people who end up being successful with writing are people who just stick with it long enough. It's just a lot of tenacity is what it is.
It is. Yeah.
You know?
Oh,
yeah.
Definitely persistence. And the more persistent you are, the better the chances are.
Yeah.
Does that answer your question, Linda?
Oh yeah, it did. I was just gonna make a joke and say that does the Writing Center have a crisis line for those that it
We should start one. Oh my God. But make it funny, right? What a great idea.
You know what would be a really good idea too, Robin, is wallpaper one of your walls. Like ask all your people, all your, all the writers to bring in their rejections, and they can take their names out and make it more anonymous, and just wallpaper a whole wall with it, so people can go and look at it.
Yeah, you know, that's actually a really good idea too. Yeah. Lots of great ideas.
I like Linda's idea. I can see it. If you've been rejected once, press 1 and you have enough. If this is your 5,034th rejection, call 911. We're worried about you.
Really good ideas.
That's awesome. Any other questions?
Well,
William, I saw you unmuted. Bill?
I have a question. I read the book in large part because I'm interested in the problem of homelessness. And I think you've done a great thing in sort of creating your characters who exist in that world. Makes the situation a lot more understandable. And I'm wondering if you, in the course of writing the book, have come up with a solution for the problem of homelessness. And, what do we have to do in a city as rich as Calgary to deal with that problem?
Gosh, I wish I had the answer. I did see this really interesting thing on TV not that long ago that was talking about, well, actually, and you might have seen this. There was this group, or these 2 or 3 women who just got together and got support from their local community to raise money to get a home for this one particular homeless person that was in their area. And I think it was in the Kensington area. And it was just like, it was a phenomenal story. And they found him this like nice little apartment. And he was just so thrilled that anyone had gone out of their way to do this for him. That I honestly think community really is the answer. Like, I think if our communities can come together, and this was something I did kind of, I didn't explore it as much in the book, but it was kind of a driving force. You know, a lot of people have asked why I chose the flood. And it really was because after the flood was over, the way that the community came together to help everybody who lost their homes was phenomenal, you know. And it was just like, you know, your heart was just bursting because you're like, look at what all these people are doing. But then it just struck in me, what if we did that all the time for the people who needed homes, you know? And so I think community is the answer. Like, we have to all come together and not, you know, and be bigger than, I don't know, be bigger. I definitely don't have all the answers, but, you know, and there's definitely complications with everything. I also think we will never eradicate homelessness, because I do think there is a point, like, if people are not willing to get help, we're not going to be able to get them out of that situation. Like, they need the care and support, you know. And if you're an addict or you have mental health issues, like, you know, unless you want the help, you're not going to be able to get the help. So I know they say Medicine Hat did it, and you know, ended homelessness in Medicine Hat, which I think is fantastic. I have a hard time believing that we'll ever do it.
They could certainly use some of these empty office buildings downtown here, and
they are,
you know,
they are,
yeah.
Yeah.
There's tons. Like, I can see one right from my apartment, the old Nexon building.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they could take part of that and and
There is one
put
of the
in safe
buildings I
injection
totally-
sites, soup kitchen, you know, like they could do so much with that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's in a good location.
Hmm.
Anyways, that's just my 2 cents worth.
Well, I know that, and it was just on the news the other day, there is one building downtown that they've earmarked to start renovating exactly for that purpose.
Mhm.
So, but I don't know.
Robin, can you say something about women in homelessness and the children who are living outside with their single parents?
It's very rare. I mean, yeah, it's really rare. And I'm not really sure what to say about it. Like, I mean, I didn't see, like, even going downtown, like, I don't see it very often. I don't think it is something you see very often. And usually if you're homeless and they see you with a child, they're going to get you off the street as quickly as. So, very, very rare circumstances. And I know in my book, I did have a mother and child on the street, and I had to wrestle with that because I kind of thought, you know, it is very rare, but I also had to kind of justify that they were very newly out there and that they were running from something, right? So it was more of a protection thing than anything else. So, I mean, no child should be on the street ever.
I think we see a lot of teens on the street. So kids who have run away from
Mhm.
home, whatever reason. So that breaks my heart when you see 14, 15, 16-year-olds out on the street. But yeah. Yeah, and it might be different in different cities as well. It's pretty harsh in Alberta
Mhm.
to be out on the street because of our weather. Oh, we're getting something from Lori. In from the cold helps homeless families. Before I heard about that, I didn't realize it was such an issue.
Mhm.
Interesting.
Yeah. Well, I think when the economy tanked, I think that's when when oil and gas tanked, like there were a lot more families that were on the street.
I know Red Deer struggles with homelessness and homeless issues and how, you know, how to work with them, how to solve it, how to fix it, and haven't come up with the answer yet, but working on it.
Yeah.
A lot of people didn't stay in shelters during COVID winters due to lower capacity and fear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a scary time. You know, they did their best, but thankfully, hopefully everything's getting better.
Any more questions? Does anybody have a flood story of their own that they want to share?
Yeah.
Just wondering if anybody.
Well, actually, sorry. Flood story I have to share is actually from South Surrey, White Rock, which is where I'm from.
Okay.
No one would have ever thought the White Rock Beach would flood. Like it was like you see out of the floods like down in Mississippi and all those things where you got these cars floating and everything. It was just unbelievable. The storm drains couldn't handle the amount of water that was just rushing down the hill. It was just amazing. But I wasn't here during I only moved here to Calgary 2 years ago, so I'm a newbie. But the thing I loved about your book, Robin, is because I am downtown, I could kind of visualize like, oh, that's probably the area that Robin was writing about, and like certain areas around here and by the river. It was a good education. I love that book. I couldn't put it down.
Thank you.
It was awesome. So anybody who hasn't read it, she hasn't paid me to say that. It's a really good book.
We have another comment in the chat. The anniversary of High River's flood is timely when reading Robin's book. The sound of the Highwood River will always stay with me. We were evacuated from our home and didn't return to live back in our home for 33 days. Oh, I'm so sorry for your experience, Lorna. Scary and hard and difficult to be displaced like that, but I'm glad that you were able to get back into your home.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting how sounds stay with us, sounds or images, and it's interesting that's often the way a book starts is by an image or something very specific. So it's something that I guess just lives deep down within us in our cellular memory when we've been impacted greatly by one thing or another.
I heard someone actually tell me once, like the sound of a tornado, is kind of like, it's one of those sounds, like if you actually experience it, you will never forget that sound. And I think the sound of the river going like that is probably very similar, just in the fact that you remember it, right? I love Lori's comment here.
Yes, I got together with my ex during the flood. We stayed in his evacuated house in Inglewood secretly with the cops outside. He was determined to protect his vintage guitars. I was terrified. We could see the river carving out the lawn, eating its way towards the house. Oh my goodness. Wow. Wow.
You're such a rebel, Lori.
Yeah. Daisy. Were the guitars okay? Okay, good.
Awesome.
Yeah, it was, he just refused to leave. So I decided to stay there with him. But we could see out the window of the living room, like the river's going by like this, and there's stuff floating in it. And your mind plays tricks on you. You think you see a body going by.
Scary.
You hope you're not going to be the next one. It was a time full of interesting things to notice for writers.
Oh yeah. Just the sheer force of water. Like I think sometimes we forget just how powerful water can be. And in my end of the city, just the pedestrian bridges that were washed out and the banks that were washed out, and it's just like, wow, like water can do this, it's kind of mind-boggling. My daughter actually recently, she's been really into like funny videos on YouTube, and usually like people doing silly things and falling and whatever. And she asked me one day why it was so funny, or why people made a big deal about belly flopping on water. and I was like, well, let's go do a little science experiment. And so I wanted to show her just, how powerful water can be. And we filled my kitchen sink up with, actually, my mom was here. This was actually in May. My mom was here, and we filled up the kitchen sink with water. And, and I showed her like, well, if you just put your hand in the water normally, like it's fine, right? And then I slapped the water and made such a mess of my kitchen. But it was super funny. And I made her do the same thing. And, and just like that sting, of your hand slapping on water. And it just, every time I think about water, I just think about how powerful it really is, and how, sometimes I think we take it for granted a little bit, and we like to swim in it, we like to fish, we like to boat, but forget how dangerous it really can be. So it can be beautiful, and it can be devastating. So
Well, that's it for questions, I think.
I could just chat with everybody all night, but
Yeah. Robin, before we go, just a last word from you. Are you working on something else now? And if you are, can you tell us anything about it?
I am working on another manuscript. I'm into the 4th draft of the book. It's another Alberta-based book. It does not deal with any devastating natural disasters. It's not a pandemic book. It's I don't know, what can I tell you about it? It's still very, I'm in a 4th draft, but I still don't think I totally know exactly what the story is really about. I mean, as you know from Rough, I like to write about issues that are, going on around us. And this one is, does kind of explore death and all its different facets, including medical assistance in dying. And that's a pretty new thing that's been approved in Canada. So there's lots of controversy around that, and just so so kind of it has to do with that, and just and the 80s. There's parts of it that take place in the 80s, and that has been, I've been having so much fun with that. So it's like reliving my childhood all over again. So
well, we look forward to reading that book when it comes out. In the meantime, if you haven't picked up a copy of Rough, it's available at your favorite independent bookstore. Or, oh, Susan, do you have a question?
Oh, yeah, I just have a very quick question.
Yes.
Robin just mentioned, Robin, I like your book very much, Rough. I read it twice. I really like it. You just mentioned that you are working on your new novel and it's 4th draft. So I was wondering, like, how many drafts do you normally do before you really finalize it? Well, I was a little bit scared, like 4th draft. Thank you.
Yeah, no, that's a fantastic question. I don't think there's ever any right or wrong number of drafts to do. Except I do think you should never try to publish after a 1st draft. So I think you definitely have to, at least 2 drafts minimum. I would like to think that this draft is going to be my last one. But I honestly can't say, and I think it's just, I think there's a point in us when we finish writing where we go, okay, this is as good as I can get it. I've done everything I possibly can, and whether that's 5 drafts or 10 drafts or whatever that looks like, I think it's different for everyone. And I really do hope that this is the last draft, because it's a really big book. It's way bigger than Rough. So and I'm talking like word count, it's considerably longer. So it's hard to edit that much stuff. And for someone who doesn't like editing, I'm really, hoping it's just about done. Well, don't want to scare you, Susan, but I mean,
yeah, fair enough. Yeah, totally. Thank you.
But yeah, like when you're happy with it, I think when you're at the point where you are happy with it, and I think the glorious thing about writing is that we're always changing and we're always learning, and writing Rough, finishing it a few years ago, I think in a couple years I'll go look back at that and be like, oh, that was terribly written, because we're always trying to grow, and we're always, we're always learning and we're always getting better. So I think it's also just great to see that progression in ourselves as writers over time. I mean, I look back at short stories I wrote 10 years ago and I'm like, oh my God. It's like, seriously, I wrote that and it got published. Like, yeah. So no, it's good. It's good to see the growth of anything, if anything else. And then the editor gets it. Yeah. And then they start like making you cut your favorite scenes and, and saying this section's too long and this let's condense. So yeah, there was a lot of that.
Well, what a great night. What a lovely group you've been. Thank you,
everyone
everybody.
for coming.
Yeah, thank you so much for spending your evening with us tonight. And congratulations, Robin.
Thank you.
Well done.
And we'll be waiting for Fran's next book too. And if you haven't read her last book, you really should. No good asking. Wonderful book. So
Thank
I have
you.
to admit, I have not read The Shore Girl yet. So, but I have read that one.
Well, thank you. Thank you. It's been super fun. Keep up the good work, all you writers. Oh, thank you for the thumbs up, and keep up the good work for all you writers. Keep up the good reading, all you readers. And yeah, best. Oh, thanks for all your congrats to Robin. Yay.
It's nice to see some faces I haven't, or not faces, but names of people I haven't seen in a long time. So this is nice.
Nice. Okay.
Thank you, Fran, and
You bet.
great work, Robin. Enjoyed the book.
Thanks, Will.
Thank you both.